You are about to cross into a world where fear is real. Real stories, unexplained phenomena where the supernatural lurks in the shadows. From the Portal of Dread. Story 1: The Beach House.
Greetings, haunting visitors. Welcome to the Portal of Dread. Prepare yourselves to cross the threshold between the real and the inexplicable. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and get comfortable. Because today, together, we are going to explore a new chapter of terror. Are you ready for the unknown? Then like, subscribe, and leave a comment saying, "I'm not afraid." Now, let's begin. Claudia parked the car in front of the old beach house in Cabo Frio and shut off the engine as if shedding the entire burden of a lifetime. For minutes, she lingered over the steering wheel, feeling her breath accelerate, then decelerate, until it almost matched the ebb and flow of the unseen waves ahead. At 59, finally retired after decades under the relentless pressure of high school teaching, her face bore the marks that discipline and self-judgment etch with a fine blade. She stepped out of the car and stood still for an extended moment, observing the White House with simple walls, blue windows, and a worn, cold stone floor. A house that seemed to breathe with the sea wind, not with her memories. As she unloaded her bags, each movement was ritualistic. The heavy suitcase, the antique books, the only portraits she permitted herself to bring from her old house in the city. "Here, Claudia, you will start anew," she murmured to herself. This time a very faint inner voice whispered back, "Start anew or remember." The breeze played with her hair, transporting her back to childhood. But internally it wasn't just relief. There was the fear of the stillness, of the morbid echo of memories. She entered, feeling the sunlight draw golden lines across the floor. The sound of her own silence immediately enveloped her. She arranged books on the shelf, clothes in the closet, each object positioned almost as in the abandoned classroom. She felt the impulse to speak aloud, as if correcting invisible students. Everything in its place. That way it's easy to find. At night, she walked along the beach barefoot in the sand, eyes fixed on the red horizon of the sunset. For an instant she felt completely liberated. But she soon noticed how the shadows of the dunes, so inviting at dusk, stretched irregularly, distorted, like the arms of someone unwilling to depart. The chill on her skin came along with an involuntary thought. Will I be forgiven here? Claudia shook her head, determined to blame the travel fatigue. But the chill lasted until in the morning, as she switched on the coffee maker, she noticed a piece of paper on the table that she didn't recall having placed there. It was yellowed, the handwriting childlike, hesitant, trembling. "Teacher, you never listened to us." Her blood ran cold. She touched the paper, folded it, and tried to laugh off the absurdity. "It must be some tasteless prank. Or perhaps I tucked this note away in an old book," she mused, but she didn't believe it. Aloud, she scoffed, "Well, now there's only me to listen. Isn't there, Claudia?" She inspected all the doors and windows. Everything was locked. Outside, not a soul stirred. Only gulls and the sound of the sea intruding through the gaps. She placed the note in the cutlery drawer, as if stowing away the ghost of a memory. In the afternoon, to rid herself of the unease, she put on a light coat and went for a walk along the beach. The cold wind bit at her face, and the sea seemed to sing a new, fierce song. Her thoughts persisted. What kind of teacher forgets a note? It was then that she noticed tiny footprints, almost erased in the sand, too small for adults. She followed them. The marks covered a small stretch of the beach and then, abruptly, ceased, as if the child who made them had simply vanished. Claudia knelt, running her finger along the damp furrow. The sand was cold, and she felt the tightening grip of a premonition in her chest. Images blurred together, children holding hands, wet notebooks, distant waves. She whispered, almost involuntarily, "Where did you go?" She forced herself to stand and walk back, determined not to entertain fantasies. That night was restless. The retired clock in the living room seemed to tick louder, marking the passage of hours as if it were a shortening leash. In the early hours of the morning, a muffled sound awakened her. Her heart pounded. She rose and, hesitantly, went to the living room. On the sofa, a new note. Only this time it wasn't on paper. It was etched directly into the wood of the coffee table in bas-relief, as if fossilized words had sprouted from within. "Why didn't you save us?" Claudia touched the letters and felt their unusual roughness like scars. She whispered, in a mix of pain and denial, there was no way. She struggled to maintain her composure. She walked from room to room, switching on all the lights, opening closets, staring at her own reflection repeatedly, and always finding herself older, more tired. In the living room mirror, her reflection asked, or seemed to ask with moist eyes, "What if you had stayed?" From the window she gazed at the dunes and swore she saw for a few seconds small shadows running, thin arms, short legs, and dark hair. But when she blinked, only the monotonous rhythm of the wind and the sound of perhaps remained. She lay down, unable to close her eyes. The whispers of the sea mingled with children's voices, oscillating between the real and the hallucinatory. "You promised, teacher." The next morning, exhausted, she dragged herself to the kitchen and stopped, astonished, before the counter. A blackboard eraser coated in damp sand rested beside the fruit bowl. She recognized it immediately. An old model, identical to those used decades ago when she still taught unruly classes. She picked it up, almost inadvertently, and let the sand trickle away. But that wasn't just sand. The smell was acidic, metallic, a reminiscence of blood mingled with the sea. Soon after, she noticed a wooden ruler leaning against the bathroom mirror, the same type of ruler used to straighten letters or to administer disciplining ear pulls. The objects appeared one after another, soaked notebooks piling up on the veranda. At first, Claudia tried to rationalize. "I must have brought it inadvertently. A neighbor must have left it." But the disarray of time and memories began to erode her courage. She leafed through one of the notebooks. The handwriting was Mariana's, a 5th grade student. "Today the teacher spoke good," it read, and the following pages were blurred with wet sand, featuring blue drawings of little fish. Images came in fragments. The speedboat rocking, screams, cold water rising up the children's shins. She pushed the notebooks back, certain it wasn't her role to revisit the past, but the past already revisits those who refuse to see it. Before leaving the veranda, she murmured softly, "I'm sorry, Mariana. I was too young as you all were." It was at night, when the clock already seemed to have stopped, that a faint light emanated from the center of the table. In the dark, Claudia trembled. She advanced with faltering steps and found an old, thick, faded yellow flashlight bearing the City Hall seal. Emergency school use. She remembered that flashlight. She had never known which excursion it had been used for. She believed it had been lost for decades. As soon as she approached, the light gained intensity and began to flicker, casting contorted, trembling shadows across the walls. Abruptly it ceased, projecting a steady beam of light onto one of the walls, and there, words began to materialize, sprouting forth like veins, reversed script, inscrutable without painstaking effort. Trembling, she went to the bathroom to retrieve a mirror. Gradually, she deciphered the message. 32 tiny fish swam to the depths. 32 tiny fish never came home. The old school refrain, repeated ad nauseum during excursions. Claudia felt her legs buckle, and even before slumping into the armchair, she realized she was weeping, silently, like a child who dreads being overheard at night. Claudia's mind was betraying her. The speedboat pitched beneath an overcast sky. Marina, seated beside her, drew fish in her notebook. "Teacher, if we fall in, can you swim?" Claudia smiled uneasily. "Of course, my dear. A teacher never forsakes anyone." Another teacher, his voice laced with concern. "Claudia, why are you so pale?" She wavered, feeling the rocking of the water, the clammy sweat. "Just seasickness, it'll pass." In the deeper recesses of her memory, the distant voices of other teachers concurred. yet her face was always conspicuously absent from the photographs. In a desperate surge of self-preservation, Claudia seized her old cell phone and engaged the recorder. She allowed it to acoustically capture everything in the room for hours. The following morning, she sat with coffee clutched in her trembling hands and pressed play, the initial hiss of static sounding more ominous than comforting. Silence. 50 seconds later, whispers, imperceptible at first, then children emerging from the depths. "Teacher, where were you? Why didn't you look for us? It was very dark down there." Her own voice, recorded unbeknownst to her. "I tried, I swear I tried, but I couldn't get onto the boat." As she listened, her skin prickled, her eyes smarted. It was real. The following morning, she ventured to approach the neighbor from next door, a man in his mid-40s, clad in unassuming attire, with deep-set eyes. "Did you hear anything unusual last night?" Her tone affected a casual air. He replied after a brief silence, "It must have been the wind or the seagulls." He smiled, but his teeth were small, almost childlike. She excused herself, returning home with her gaze fixed on the man's footprints, uncannily small for any adult. Through the window, she still watched the neighbor receding into the distance, diminishing until he seemed merely a shadow among the dunes. In the kitchen, propped against the sink, Claudia muttered under her breath, for her ears alone, "If only I had had the courage." Later on, she discovered a box of photographs on the veranda. She leafed through yellowed images. Children queued before the excursion, smiles, interlocking arms, elation. Yet the more Claudia scrutinized the photographs, the more their features shifted. Mouths contorted into silent screams, eyes widened, mouths consumed entire faces. In one striking image, it was herself, youthful, smiling, but with her back turned to the children drowning in the background. Her recollection dictated she was never present. She had consistently asserted she was indisposed, but what if she had been lying for so long that the truth had been rewritten in her memories? The bewilderment unsettled her, the principal explaining to her, "You are an excellent teacher, Claudia, but the parents are in shock." She merely listened, unable to face anyone else. Internally, she shrieked, "I wasn't there, I couldn't have been." The subsequent night ushered in greater unease. Puncturing the silence, a metallic sound resonated through the house, the groaning of timber and metal, impossible to feign ignorance of. In the parlor, she discovered an antique, corroded school desk, positioned in front of the dormant television set. The screen reflected the flickering light of the flashlight, originating from the background. Etched into the wood, a message, carved in fury. "I waited for the teacher to return." The script belonged to Marina, recognized from countless notes, read and corrected over the years. Collapsing onto her knees, Claudia felt the very fabric of her existence unravel, and tears flowed in a warm deluge. The pain was not merely from loss, but from unexpiated guilt. For an instant, the sound of children's laughter reached her ears, emanating from the direction of the sea. With a parched throat, Claudia uttered in a voice bordering on supplication, "Forgive me, please forgive me. I also wished I had returned." In the pre-dawn hours, upon attempting to illuminate the nightstand lamp, she was confronted by tiny handprints splayed across the bedroom walls, dozens of them, all wet, with droplets of salty water dripping onto the already damp floor. The aroma was a blend of iodine, decaying algae, and that unmistakable stench of stagnant fear. Claudia stumbled onto the veranda, gasping for breath, and the sight that greeted her rendered her immobile. On the shoreline, the spectral outlines of children ascending from the dunes, their forms undulating as if viewed beneath a watery veil. They waved, and Claudia recognized their opaque eyes, their bluish skin, their communicative silence. Marina, leading the spectral procession, clutched the flashlight that throbbed like a heart, and all the children opened their mouths, intoning a chant that, though soundless, vibrated the air around them. "Teacher, come down and play with us." Claudia clenched her eyes shut. attempting to resist the temptation to respond, but felt her body drawn forward towards the call. Just one more time. "Teacher, we won't leave you alone." These were voices that reverberated on the wind, yet also within her chest, intermingled with her own yearning for reunion and forgiveness. The lit lantern projected in stark letters onto the last wall. "You abandoned us." Claudia sank to her knees, gazing at the message, and for the first time allowed herself to remember. She had left the excursion, compelled not by illness, but by her fear of water, her inability to brave boats, to take risks. She had lied to herself, lied to everyone, leaving behind children who depended on her. Now, 30 years later, the truth came to light, and nothing remained but to confront it. A final, older voice materialized in her mind. "Do you have the courage to descend now, Claudia?" She descended onto the sand, guided by the lantern's glow, where school objects emerged amidst the foamy waves, small pencils, notebook pages, plastic toys. The children, her students, emerged from the sea, waving. Among them, Marina extended a hand, her eyes gentle. "It's never too late to learn, teacher." The instant Claudia grasped the hand, time seemed to dissolve. The sea vanished. The voices ceased. Only the faint thud of a classroom door opening and closing remained in the distance. Claudia finally felt the lightness of forgiveness, and when the waves advanced upon her ankles, she did not recoil. 3 days later, her neighbors noticed her absence. They found only the lantern on the table, and on the walls the last words, etched firmly, and this time a different one. "I've finally learned my lesson." But have we all learned in time? Fishermen swear they see, during foggy pre-dawn hours, a woman and children playing along the surf line. At low tide, they say, one can discern the algae-covered wreckage of the schoolboat, a lantern blinking imbued with longing. And, on any night with an open window, new residents report notes left in the house, always bearing the same message. The teacher finally heeded us, and now who will listen to you?
Story 2. The Haunted Office.
Have you ever had the unsettling sensation of being watched during a medical appointment? That peculiar feeling that there's something beyond the healthcare professional attending to your every word, every movement, every breath? Most of us have experienced this primal discomfort in clinical environments. That knot in your stomach when the doctor furrows their brow looking at your test results. The heavy silence that seems to stretch into eternity before a diagnosis is given. The feeling of utter vulnerability, as if our very soul were being weighed alongside our physical body. But what if I told you that in some places, this sensation isn't mere paranoia? What if there are clinics where something far more sinister than illness is ravenous, waiting, observing every patient who walks through the door? Share in the comments. Have you ever felt an inexplicable presence during a medical consultation? Have you ever left an appointment with the strange feeling that you left something behind, something you can never reclaim? Because what I'm about to tell you today will force you to rethink every medical visit you've ever made in your life. Some clinics harbor secrets that medicine can never truly account for. What would you do if you discovered your patients were losing weight, even while adhering to diets specifically designed for weight gain? Imagine the despair of watching people who came seeking help wasting away before your very eyes, while your scales register progressively lower numbers, week after week. The mounting panic when you realize your scientific knowledge cannot explain why human bodies are being consumed from within, even while receiving all the requisite nutrients. Now imagine discovering that it's no mere coincidence, that there's something in the air of that place that feeds, quite literally, on the very essence of people. Something that has transformed your clinic into an invisible abattoir, where every consultation is, in fact, a meal. The cloying, sweet odor you can't identify. The whispers that seem to emanate from the walls during consultations. The constant sensation that someone is standing directly behind you, breathing down your neck, while you take the blood pressure of an 80-year-old woman who seems to be gradually dissipating. Would you feel it when the room temperature plummets without explanation? When your work instruments begin to stir on their own? When you realize you're no longer merely treating malnutrition, but rather witnessing something preying upon the very souls of your patients. This is the true story of a nutritionist who discovered that some places possess a hunger, and that we do not always get to choose our patients. Paola Santos, aged 42, was the type of professional who would not tolerate mysteries devoid of scientific explanation. A renowned nutritionist in Brasilia, she decided to start over in Arniqueira after a tumultuous divorce. The move to the countryside in 2023 promised peace, a stable clientele, and the chance to make a difference in the lives of local residents. The clinic she rented was located in an old house in the center of the small agricultural town. A 1960s-era building, furnished with dark wood pieces that the landlady insisted on leaving to lend the space some charm. Paola acquiesced. After all, it would spare her the expense of furnishing. What she didn't know was that some pieces of furniture carry more than mere memories. The first thing that caught her attention was the scale. A venerable, cast-iron scale, heavy and imposing, starkly contrasting with her modern equipment. This scale belonged to the doctor who practiced here before, explained Donna Rosina, the landlady, averting her gaze from the object. He saw a great many elderly patients. Arniqueira was steeped in tradition. Homesteads dotting verdant hills, a predominantly elderly populace, and well-preserved rural customs. It was exactly the tranquil setting Paola had been seeking. The initial weeks proved auspicious, a fully booked schedule, primarily with patients over 70, referred by the local health post. But minor peculiarities began to manifest. The clinic consistently felt colder than it ought to, even with the windows tightly shut. At times during consultations, Paola would swear she heard whispers emanating from the hallway. Yet upon investigation, she would find only silence. The antique scale emitted peculiar metallic clinks, as if its internal gears were masticating. The patients also exhibited peculiar behaviors. Many would arrive bearing small bags of fruit or bread, which they would deposit in a specific corner of the clinic to ensure good fortune in their treatment. Paola initially found this rural custom charming, until she observed that these foodstuffs decayed with impossible swiftness, sometimes in mere hours, as if something was siphoning their vitality. But it was in the third week that Paola discerned something that sent chills down her spine. Every single one of her patients was losing weight. Every single one. Without exception. Even those she had prescribed hypercaloric diets for weight gain. And the antique scale seemed sated, registering each lost kilogram with a metallic click that sounded almost like a sigh of contentment. The first time Paola sensed she was not alone in the clinic, it was a rainy Tuesday in June. She was attending to Mr. Manuel, a 78-year-old farmer who had lost 8 kilograms in 2 weeks, weight he could ill afford to shed. As she explained a new diet, she noticed the man had stopped paying attention to her. His glazed eyes fixated on a spot behind Paola, as if someone were standing there. "Are you all right, sir?" she inquired, turning instinctively. Nothing, just the wall adorned with framed diplomas. But when she turned back to Mr. Manuel, he was whispering something in a language she didn't recognize. Guttural, harsh words that seemed to scrape his throat. "Forgive me, doctor," he said, blinking as if roused from a trance. "Sometimes I get a bit absent. Must be my age." But Paola had noticed something more unsettling. During the whispers, the room's temperature had plummeted. His breath formed small clouds of vapor, even with the heater on. And there was a smell, sweet, cloying, like rotten fruit mingled with something medicinal. The following days brought similar episodes. Mrs. Conceicão, 82, also began conversing, with unseen presences during her appointments, always in the same strange tongue. Paola attempted to research the words she managed to memorize, but found no correspondence in any known language. What haunted her most were the moments of absolute silence. Suddenly, all sounds ceased. There was no longer rain drumming on the roof, cars passing in the street, not even the tick-tock of the wall clock. It was as if the entire world held its breath, waiting for something. During these silences, the old scale would move, imperceptibly at first, then with more obvious movements, the pan oscillating on its own, the pointers spinning without any weight upon them, and always, accompanied by that metallic sound reminiscent of chewing. The final straw came when Paola decided to work late to organize the patient files. It was already past 9 p.m. when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, dragging steps like those of someone very frail. She thought it might be a patient who had forgotten something, but when she opened the door, the hallway was empty. The footsteps continued. They weren't coming from the hallway. They were emanating from inside the consultation room itself. Behind her, Paola turned slowly and saw the scale moving on its own, as if someone had just stepped onto it. The pointer indicated exactly 62 kilograms. At that moment, she understood something terrifying. It wasn't just her patients who were being weighed. Something was measuring, evaluating, if she would also make a suitable meal. Paola spent the night wide awake, researching the history of the house and Arniquera. What she uncovered in the early hours of the morning turned her stomach. The doctor who had practiced in the office before her was no ordinary physician. It was Dr. Albertino Mendez, a psychiatrist who, in the 1980s, conducted experimental therapies on the elderly. The newspaper reports she found online were deeply unsettling. Patients who entered for geriatric depression treatment emerged altered. Family members reported their loved ones returning home empty inside, talking to themselves, rapidly losing weight until they perished within weeks. Most chilling was an archive photo showing the office in the 1980s. The same ancient scale was there, occupying the exact same corner where it now registered the emaciation of her patients. Dr. Albertino had died mysteriously in 1987. He was found in his office on a Sunday morning, completely desiccated, as if he had spent months in the desert. But the medical report revealed something impossible. He had perished in less than 12 hours, his body drained of all moisture and nutrients, weighing only 34 kilograms, half his normal weight. Determined to comprehend what was unfolding, Paola sought out Donna Eulalia, her most senior patient and the only one who seemed aware that something was amiss. The 85-year-old woman received her in her small house late in the afternoon, her eyes alert with the heavy burden of secrets. "Doctor, you shouldn't have rented that place," Eulalia said, serving coffee that exuded the comforting aroma of cinnamon. "That house, it hungers. It always has. Long before Dr. Albertino, long before any of us." With a trembling voice, Eulalia recounted the history of the region's old sugarcane plantations, the slaves who perished from starvation and exhaustion, and the survival rituals that inadvertently nourished something that should never have been awakened. It is an entity that feeds on vital essence through deprivation. The weaker you become, the stronger it grows. "Why do you continue going to the office then?" Paola asked, her voice nearly failing her. Eulalia smiled sadly. "Because it won't let us stop. Once you enter that place, it marks you, and then you have to return. It's as if it plants a seed of hunger within us that only grows." At that point, at that moment, Paola felt a pang in her stomach. An unfamiliar, insatiable hunger that seemed to emanate from the very depths of her being. And she realized, with growing horror, that it was already too late to escape. Over the ensuing days, Paola began to experience firsthand what it meant to be marked. The hunger that had begun as a mere pang transformed into a constant and unsettling need. Not hunger for sustenance. She ate normally. It was a different kind of hunger, as if something within her were consuming her very life force. She awoke each morning weighing less. First it was 500 grams, then a kilogram, then 2. Her home scale displayed dwindling numbers that defied all nutritional logic. She was eating adequately and maintaining her exercise routine, yet her body simply wasted away. Nights were the worst. Paola began to experience vivid dreams where she walked through the corridors of the consulting room, yet the space had morphed into something far vaster and more ancient. Walls of damp stone, chains suspended from the ceiling, and always, the unsettling sound of the scale being operated by unseen hands. In her dreams, she witnessed Dr. Albertino. The gaunt, pallid man weighed patients who seemed unable to dismount the scale, held fast by an unseen force as their bodies withered in a matter of minutes. And behind him, an amorphous shadow observed, seemingly satisfied, as if appraising the quality of each meal. During the day, the consultations devolved into sessions of psychological torture. Her patients arrived progressively emaciated, but now spoke openly about what came for them at night. So Manuel described a presence that settled on the edge of his bed, whispering promises of pain relief in exchange for just a little more essence. Donna Conceição offered a terrifying confession. "Doctor, I awaken in the dead of night and find myself walking toward this place. It's not my will, do you understand? My legs move on their own. And when I arrive here, I stand motionless before the door until sunrise, as if I were surrendering myself." It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Paola was alone, organizing patient files, when she heard the front door creak open. Familiar footsteps echoed down the corridor. They belonged to Sir Antonio, who had passed away 3 days prior. The man had completely withered away in his final week, weighing a mere 38 kilograms before his demise. The footsteps drew closer to the consulting room. The door swung open on its own, revealing nothing, only cold air and that sweet, putrid stench. But the antique scale began to stir, registering precisely 38 kilograms. Mr. Antonio had returned for his final consultation. Paola finally grasped the terrifying truth. The entity not only fed on the living, it held the dead captive, compelling them to return eternally, to be continuously siphoned of every last drop of essence remaining in their souls. And she knew that soon, very soon, she too would become part of this eternal collection of famished patients. Desperate and weighing a mere 47 kilograms, having shed 15 kilograms in 3 weeks, Paola made a decision that would alter everything. If she couldn't break the curse, she would at least uncover the full truth before becoming yet another spectre bound to that office. In the early hours of Friday, she returned to the office armed with coarse salt, holy water she had obtained from the local priest, and a suicidal resolve. Donna Eulalia had provided her with one final crucial piece of information. The entity materializes completely only when satiated. That is when it is most vulnerable, but also most perilous. The office at night was a different cosmos entirely. The walls seemed to breathe, slowly contracting and expanding. The sweet, putrid stench had intensified to the point of being almost noxious, and there were voices, dozens of them whispering simultaneously in the strange tongue her patients spoke. Paola walked towards the antique scale, her heart pounding so fiercely it felt as though it would rupture. "I know you're there," she declared aloud, surprised by the resolve in her own voice. "I know what you did to Dr. Albertino, to my patients, to me, and I know you are hungry." The temperature plummeted instantly. The voices ceased. The silence became palpable, weighing upon her shoulders like molten lead. Then it appeared. It had no discernible human form. It was more an absence of light that vaguely resembled a feminine silhouette. But its eyes were black holes that seemed to siphon the sanity from anyone who gazed directly into them. When it spoke, its voice reverberated from all corners of the room simultaneously. "Have you come to surrender voluntarily? How convenient." "No," Paola replied, clutching the coarse salt with trembling hands. "I've come to strike a bargain." The entity cackled, a sound like glass being ground. "A bargain? You possess nothing I desire beyond what I am already taking." "Yes, I do. I possess knowledge. I know precisely how to identify what kind of essence you need, which patients will be most nourishing. how to optimize your process. Paola swallowed hard, hating every word that left her mouth. I can be more useful alive than dead. The creature approached, and Paola felt as if thousands of icy needles pierced her skin. Interesting. You offer to become my partner. I offer to become your specialist, but on one condition: you free all the others, the living and the dead. Only I remain. For a moment that felt eternal, the entity considered the proposal. Paola could feel her mind being probed, her intentions analyzed as if they were computer files. I accept, the creature finally said, but if you try to betray me, I won't betray you. Paola lied, clenching the coarse salt in her right hand while discreetly uncapping the holy water with her left. It was then that Paola did the only thing that could save not only her soul, but those of all trapped in that place. She threw herself onto the ancient scale and screamed, "I offer myself completely." What happened next would defy everything science knows about sacrifice, hunger, and redemption. What Paola had discovered in her research on Dr. Albertino was more than just experimental methods. He had left notes hidden within the house's structure, notes she found the previous night, written in blood behind an old furniture drawer. The entity fed through the scale, which functioned as a portal between our reality and the plane where it existed. But there was a flaw in the system. If someone offered themselves completely and voluntarily, weighing exactly the same as the entity had, consumed over the years, the portal would invert. Dr. Albertino had tried this in 1987. He almost succeeded but failed because he miscalculated the total devoured weight. Paola, with her background in nutrition, had been meticulous. She tallied every kilogram lost by each patient since the entity had arrived in Arniqueira, including Dr. Albertino himself. The number was exact: 847 kilograms of vital essence siphoned over nearly 40 years. When Paola threw herself onto the scale and screamed her offering, the pointer began to spin wildly. But she wasn't sacrificing herself. She was activating a trap that had taken decades to prepare. The entity realized too late. "What have you done?" it roared, its form beginning to distort and being pulled towards the scales. "I calculated your hunger," Paola stated, feeling a supernatural force pulling her as well. "And I discovered that you are never truly satiated. You store every essence you consume within you, like a battery. And now..." The scales registered exactly 847 kilograms, an impossible weight for Paola's 47-kilogram body, yet feasible when considering the sum of her essence combined with all the essence the entity had stolen. The consulting room began to implode upon itself, not physically, but dimensionally. Paola witnessed all her patients, both living and deceased, being released as golden smoke that escaped through the windows. Mr. Manuel, Mrs. Conchison, Mr. Antonio, dozens of others who had been imprisoned for decades, finally free. But the entity was not destroyed, it was siphoned back into its own plane of existence, along with all the stolen essence. And Paola went with it. What transpired in the ensuing minutes, she could never fully articulate. She found herself in a placeless place, a dimension of eternal hunger where the entity existed in constant agony. It was itself a victim of something greater, something that had corrupted it centuries ago and compelled it to feed lest it be consumed. "You don't understand," the creature whispered, now diminished to a pathetic shadow. "I was human once too. I was also a nutritionist. I also tried to help." Paola finally grasped the complete truth. The entity was Dr. Maria Fernandez, an 18th century nutritionist who had attempted to save malnourished slaves and, in her desperation, had forged a pact with even older and hungrier forces. With the portal's inversion, the positions were reversed. The stolen essence returned to its rightful owners, but someone needed to remain behind to maintain dimensional equilibrium and ensure that the true source of hunger remained imprisoned. 6 months later, the residents of Arniqueira remark on how all the elderly in the town appear healthier and more energetic. The old consulting room was demolished, and on the site, a plaza with a fountain was constructed. Yet some swear that, on very silent nights, they can still hear the sound of scales being operated, and a feminine voice whispering nutritional guidance to lost souls, keeping them nourished and protected from a hunger far greater and more ancient. Paula Santos found her true purpose, to nourish and protect souls for eternity. Thank you for going through this dark night with us at Portal do Terre. Now tell me, would you dare to go through this? Share in the comments if you can sleep tonight. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the bell to receive more chilling stories every week. Sleep well, if you can. Until the next story, good night. Oh, really?